we weren't, it's not like we were expecting her to come out completely dead. Were they doing chest compressions at that point?
Yeah, they definitely
were doing them. So you remember seeing that. Okay, so hey guys, we're filming episode 2. This time we're going to talk about Mila's birth, and we're going to get into the details of that. So if you're at all sensitive to birth trauma or anything related there, I would skip this episode. Stay tuned for episode 3, where we talk about Stephen's stroke. But this one is going to get into some detail around her birth. So I want to preface this whole story by saying that my memory of that entire day is cloudy. So there is most likely going to be things that I say that might be slightly out of order as far as like what the doctors and nurses did when I was in labor. And the bottom line is they saved her life. Everybody everybody did their job flawlessly. And if I say something that sounds weird to you, it is most definitely my error and just memory. Trauma has a way of kind of like clouding your memories or fogging them up or whatever. During this pregnancy in particular, for some reason, I was worried about the cord. And I don't really know why, but I will say my mom was also worried about the cord, and we had no reason to be worried. And I remember mom asking me after my 38-week appointment, what the doctor said about the cord. Nothing was wrong, no indication for ultrasound. It's not like we had any reason to suspect there was a problem with the cord. But he and I talked about what would happen if there was a cord accident. And I was, comforted, but still had a little bit of an uneasy feeling, just like a sense. I don't know, like just an instinct of just for some reason there was a fear there. And so fast forward, it was scheduled induction. That was just my choice. Everyone has their own preference, and a lot of people want to go into labor naturally, and totally fine. For me, I just preferred the predictability, and so opted for a scheduled voluntary induction at 39 weeks, and it was scheduled for 39 weeks in one day, and so we had to be there at 6 a.m. Got there that morning. I don't know if you remember me telling you, Mila was quiet that day, like movement-wise. Like she was already kind of just chill. But it was just interesting, and I remember being like a little bit worried about her movement that morning, but obviously I was about to be induced. So they were about to hook her up, and it wasn't, they were going to be monitoring her. So we were going to know. And it's not like she didn't move. It was just slower than normal. And so, they started all the stuff. They started Pitocin, and labor just kind of progressed like you would expect it to. What do you remember about the early like heart rate changes? Because she early on was a little unhappy, but they were like shifting positions and stuff. Were you worried at all at that point?
Not really. I didn't really have a reason to be. So he was very calm, the doctor was. So it was something I wasn't worried about. I'm one of those that just trust professionals to do their job, and I don't try to put it on myself to try to worry about that because it's unnecessary.
Yeah. So anyway, so we were doing position changes and everything, and just really kind of maintained this not super happy state that was again ebbing and flowing. She was happy most of the time, but there were times where her heart rate would decel during contractions. So ultimately, the doctor came in and he decided to do an amnio infusion. When he broke my water, there was meconium. And if you don't know, meconium is when the baby literally passes its first stool in utero, and it indicates that the baby is in at least some level of distress. So the nurse, when the meconium was noted, went ahead and paged NICU just to let them know to be on alert, because there was a baby that had been in some distress, just in case they needed to send respiratory therapy for any kind of aspirated or inhaled meconium or anything like that. I do remember looking at the nurse, I don't know if you remember this, and telling her that I won't be surprised if Mila came out with the cord around her neck, because I'd been worried about it during my pregnancy. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So at some point during the labor induction, she was really not happy. So they called the doctor, and he came into the room and was working on attaching a scalp monitor I'm sure you remember this part.
I do.
And I have a memory of the nurse like holding like literal electrical cords, and they were swapping, and the doctor was at the foot of the bed talking to me at the same time, explaining that baby wasn't happy. It was early in labor, time to go have a baby in the operating room, and basically just getting my consent, explaining the situation. So everything starts moving really, really, really fast. And it was scary. It was really, really scary. And I'm sure it was scary for you too. If anybody has had a stat C-section, which is different from an emergency C-section. So an emergency C-section is we need to have this baby in, I want to say it's like within an hour or within 30 minutes. A stat C-section is literally a splash and dash. They betadine their hands and go. Decision to incision time, which, if you don't know, is from the moment they decide we're going to do a C-section to the moment that they do the incision, was less than 6 minutes, which is really fast, really good, excellent care. So the fact that we'll get into this in a moment, but the fact that you remember seeing them like working on her means that it was very much after 6 minutes. So I remember, a couple of things in the operating room. One of the main things that sticks out is the moment that she was delivered and my doctor saying, "That is a true knot." And it wasn't the words that he said, it was the way that he said it. I don't think you were in the room. You must not have been for that point, for that part. It was the weight of the tone of his voice was grave. And I'm sure fear. I mean, he is an incredible doctor, incredible human being, just really, really sweet. And I know that situations in births and mine or Mila's impacted him a lot. And so I'm sure there was fear there. I mean, they're human beings. I remember asking the girl that was behind me, which I still have to this day have not been able to find her. Maybe through this podcast one day she will find me, but I asked if Mila had a heartbeat. And she said no, but they're working on her. And I remember repeatedly asking her if they were resuscitating Mila. And I remember her saying yes, they are. And it took them, what we learned later, because again, it's really fuzzy. And even when you're in the moment, it's fuzzy. They did CPR for a total of 25 minutes. So she was completely pulseless. If you know what an APGAR score is, it's basically the way that they score the baby. You can get a 10, babies can get a 10 on the APGAR score, but they almost never do. So our two oldest were 9s, which is great, awesome, almost perfect. Mila's was 0 at 5 minutes, at 10, at 15, at 20 minutes, and at 25 minutes. So she was clinically dead that entire time. Right after her APGAR score was taken at 25 is when they got a faint pulse on her. 28 to 30 minutes is when they got her pulse to a rate that is healthy for a newborn, which would be in the hundreds, I believe. I also remember looking up at the camera in the room, which is meant for you to be able to see your baby right after birth and it's happy and you've had a C-section and everything's going great and you get to watch them, I don't know what they do in a healthy birth C-section thing, but I'm sure they're like taking vitals and temps and all that. That wasn't the case with Mila. So I remember looking up at the ceiling where the camera was, and I remember seeing her lifeless body. And then that's it. I don't know I have no idea at what point that was. None. I know she wasn't ventilated, so it would have been early. And then at some point someone saw me looking at the camera, I'm sure, and turned it off. Which is, I mean, they should have. That's what needs to happen, in my opinion. I mean, everyone might think differently. Some people might feel strongly that the camera should stay on. I would not want the camera on. Important to note, too, that we trusted our team.
Mm-hmm.
We will get into doctors that we have had or that Mila has had that we absolutely did not trust. And so if I had a doctor that I didn't trust or a team that I didn't trust, I don't know how I would feel about the camera. For me specifically, I trusted our team completely. So camera off. So I remember they she was in I guess you would call it an incubator. She wasn't a preemie, but she was in, whatever. And then they wheeled her out. So I remember seeing her very briefly. So there were 2 times I saw her, one lifeless, 2 when they were wheeling her to the NICU. And then at some point they finished and they started to wheel me out. Now, here is a really important, I don't know if you remember this part, but this sticks in my memory. I had 2 nurses that day, but they were wheeling me out, and I remember seeing both of them, who I am fortunate to call friends now, with tears streaming down their face. And that means everything to me because they cared. And if you are a nurse or a doctor or any kind of a medical provider, your patients want to see emotion like that. We need that. They cared, and that meant everything. It is okay, in my opinion, for doctors, nurses, and other medical providers to show genuine emotion when they are touched, when they are grieved, when they're in a moment like that. And that would be one reason why that sticks in my memory, because it meant a lot. It meant a lot. And so if those 2 nurses are watching this, which I'm sure they will be because we'll share it with them, thank you. Um, Thank you for not wiping your tears because I remember. Anyway, they wheeled me out. The doctor, he was there, like he wheeled me to recovery. It wasn't just like a transport team. He was like personally bedside and we were talking. I remember he was telling us this is really serious, you know? And I also remember him saying that there'd never been a baby down that long at that hospital and that they don't know what will happen. Do you remember anything else that he said?
Yeah, I just appreciated his truthfulness with it. I mean, there's always that false hope that they can
Mhm.
give you, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I appreciated just the honesty because in the way he said it, he was able to kind of have that fine line where yes, there is hope here, but also too there is worry, and you genuinely, should be worried about that because they can't guarantee
Mhm.
things, but the way it was done, I'll always remember that and
Yeah.
always appreciate it because it was just I don't think he could have done it any better, to be honest with
No, I
you.
agree. I think all of them were that
Yeah.
way. They struck such a good balance between not giving false hope, but giving hope, but also we knew the severity of the situation that she was in. And so, as you know, after a C-section, or you may know after a C-section, you've got to go to recovery. Unfortunately, I was away from my baby. She was in the NICU where she needed to be, and I was stuck in recovery for 2 hours. So we were able to talk to the nurses, and she told me that Mila had a true knot in her cord, a very tight knot, and it was wrapped around her neck twice. And once those 2 hours were up, and we were updating family too. So like I remember talking to my sister on FaceTime because you had texted my family to let them know
Yeah, I was
that she
updating
was
them.
being resuscitated. And so I remember talking to my sister. I guess at that point I would have been texting my family too. And once the 2 hours were up, they took us up to see her. And so then we entered into this new NICU world. And we we were able to reach our hand through the little, I guess you call it, I think it's actually an isolette. It's either an isolette or an incubator. One of those 2 is right. But I don't know if you remember, but we both like reached our hand in. We have a photo which I'll show here. But we reached our hand in and that was the first time that we were able to touch her. And I don't know about you, but there was a disconnect that I felt like this is my baby. Like seriously, this is my baby. You know? Like it wasn't that I didn't love her at all. It was just like it was like all of a sudden there's this little tiny human laying there. So there was no transition from birth to on my chest or anything like that, you know? So it was clinical, which it had to be. It had to be. So anyway, so I remember, the doctor came back, so he was there. We made him so behind seeing patients that day, which I understand, and I will never get mad at a long wait in an OB's office because I know we made other our situation caused other patients to have to wait probably hours to see him that day. But he was able to pop down to the NICU and we talked bedside with her. We met the neonatologist. We were able to talk face to face with the nurse practitioner. And again, not false hope, but hope, but this is serious. And the main point was A, there's never been a baby at this hospital down this long, and B, there's never been a baby at any hospital down this long, or there has been, but it is very rare. And I mean like rare, rare. So there was a very real, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how her brain is going to be. And I will stop here and say, as far as the brain is concerned, so we were in a hospital with a level 3 NICU that has cooling therapy, which is basically just induced hypothermia, where they drop the baby's temperature down to a certain level, and they are able to protect and preserve brain function. It's like a bed that they have super, 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 just down to like the decimal point degree. And so they had already started that, but it's what's interesting is they told me later that she was already hypothermic before she even was upstairs, which helped, not hurt. It didn't hurt her, it helped her. The other thing I remember my doctor telling me later was that I asked him, I said, was she blue or purple when you opened me up? And he said, no, she was white. So anyway, everything happened as you can imagine from there. We saw her, we went back to the room, up like my room on the mother baby floor. Do you remember the next door baby that cried a lot?
Yeah, I
That
do.
was tough.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that was tough was when people would tell me like congratulations in the elevator. I didn't feel like I didn't want to be congratulated in it. They didn't know. It's not their fault and they're trying to be nice, but it was like it was painful. Pretty quickly I said I'm out of here. I don't want to be here. And it was because there was a baby crying next door. There were, babies all over the floor, and I just didn't want to be in that environment without my baby. I think that was a mistake. I should have probably stayed, but I did the best I could with the information that I had at the time. And so I asked my doctor if I could go home, and he did allow me to go home after 24 hours, which is unusual for a C-section, but can be permitted in certain circumstances. Do you remember when we walked out the double doors of the hospital and I just lost it?
Mm-hmm.
I cried the entire way home. It was like 45 minutes home,
Yeah.
right? Or an hour.
It was an hour.
So when the doctor was in the room and he was doing all of that, how were you feeling? What were you thinking?
Well, at that point, I was a little bit worried than like a normal birth at that point because the first two were
Like
normal.
more than a normal birth, you mean?
Yeah, I would say so. Because I didn't really know what was going to happen, to be honest with you. So, obviously, being rushed back or about to be rushed back there, I didn't know that was about to happen, any of that. So, my emotions really weren't where I could process them yet. I
Were
like
you imagining worst case scenarios?
Not really. I try not to do that. I try not to imagine worst case scenarios. I am a planner. I do like to plan things. I like to know when things are going to happen and what's going to happen and that type of stuff. I don't like to be surprised with stuff, but I understand that, especially with all the stuff, that's we've had, it's really not possible. But if I'd prefer it, I am a planner. I like to know what's about to happen or what I think is about to happen. And in this case, that was not able to be done. So there's no question that, yeah, I was surprised. And I was just hoping that, everything was okay. I mean, I still had that view where, I still felt like, things were okay at the time,
Mhm.
but I didn't know any different until, they told you that,
Well, they didn't know any different,
yeah.
you know? I remember that the doctor said something to the effect of that we would find out, once we got in there, meaning into the uterus and got her out, what was going on. I'm sure they had ideas, differentials, and probably suspected that, it had something to do with the cord, and I mean, a knot was probably in the top of their differential or at the top of their differential, but they didn't know. So, I think I mean, we didn't know either, but I also think you and we weren't I mean, it's not like we were expecting her to come out completely dead. That's not what we were thinking was gonna happen.
Mm-mm.
Because when you rush back for a stat C-section, yes, it's serious, but you're thinking they're gonna get her out and it's gonna be fine, and that's why you're there, that's why you're in the hospital, and they did, and it was, but not right away, obviously, and we'll get into some of that more, but, you know, that that was mainly going through my head. I know I, was emotional. I do remember looking back at you as they were wheeling me out, and you mouthed, "It's okay, I love you." Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And again, scared, crying, but still thinking it's gonna be okay. They're gonna have her out and everything's gonna be fine. I mean, were you thinking that too in that situation, or were you a little more guarded?
Probably a little bit more guarded during that, especially when they started to take you back. But
Because they were
again,
moving really fast.
yeah, and that was the other part is they were moving so fast it was hard for me to even think,
Mhm.
really, and have time to process it.
Yeah.
With me being a processor, I do like to think things through and understand, but
But when they're
um,
moving that fast, like, there's a difference in, like, taking me back versus they are rushing top speed as fast as they possibly can.
mhm.
So then I'm sure that that was from your side, like, watching it. I mean, how did that affect your perception of things unfolding?
Well, there's definitely I didn't know much about that or what was going to happen, but just from me, just what I was used to, there was definitely a little bit more of a worry there, but I was still guarded emotion wise because I didn't really want to go down that part of, oh yeah, this could happen or this could happen or this may or may
So when
not.
you say guarded, you actually mean you were not trying to think of, like, the worst case?
That is correct.
Because I was more positive in that I had hope, like, everything's gonna be fine. So when I asked you if you were more guarded, I guess what I meant was if you were less hopeful.
No, I wouldn't say that. I was still hopeful at that time. I really wouldn't say I was less hopeful until it was walking into that room.
Yeah,
I think, and then I think that's where it changed for me.
because of what you saw.
Hmm.
Which, I mean, take me back, exactly. I know we talked about it a little bit, but what really did you see? Like, if you really focus in on that memory.
The part I remember after you were wheeled back and after getting my stuff on, I remember rushing back there with one of the nurses.
So you walk into the operating room.
Yep,
Take us through
yep.
exactly everything you're seeing, hearing.
Walking in, I remember there were a bunch of people crowded around her. It was on the left, my left, when I was walking in the door. So you're right when you were sitting down.
Wait, they were working on her. Oh, yeah, yeah, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, you were facing the door,
Yeah.
and I was walking in. So it was on your right, my
Mhm.
left. I
Could you
remember
see me, like, at all, or were the doctors around the
doctors were
operating field?
doctors were around you. It was hard for me to see much of anything because they had some stuff closed off. I remember.
Closed off?
Yeah, just like it was. I don't know if it was shielded or what they did with it, but I just remember I looked over at the baby for a second, and I remember her just being there. She wasn't moving, wasn't doing any of that. And I remember a bunch of them being around there, already in there.
Do you remember, were they doing chest compressions at that
Oh
point?
yeah, yeah, they definitely
They were
were.
doing them, so you
Hmm.
remember seeing that.
Yeah, and then I remember walking around.
Did you know that that's what they were doing?
I did after when I saw it, just not before I came into the room. And
Yeah.
then I walked around.
Well, let's stop at that moment. You saw them doing chest compressions. What's going through your mind?
Um, honestly, I didn't know what had happened, so I didn't really know what to think. I
Yeah.
just knew that there was a problem.
Yeah.
Now, what the extent of that problem was, I don't really know.
Mhm.
Or didn't know at the time. So I was more confused trying to understand really than anything else.
Right.
And so then I remember just walking around, and that's when I saw you, for the first time of being in there. And there was there was happiness that I was in there with
Mhm.
you at the time because I wasn't
Yeah.
earlier.
And I had been asking about you repeatedly. I do remember that. And in fact, that might be what triggered them to remember dad, which sounds awful, but in that situation,
Yeah,
like I said, everything's focused around the baby.
yeah. So that was the good thing is I was in there with you. I mean, because that was that took a load off right there just being in with you.
Did you think when you walked into that room, sorry to keep cutting you off, but did you think when you walked in that something could be wrong with me? that cross your mind, or was it mostly just the
Part of
baby?
me, for sure. Just because when you think about it and you watch, I mean, this is bad to do, but when you watch TV shows and all that type of stuff, I mean, there's always complications with that. Again, it's something that, you know, is it going to happen? No. I mean, every time, no. Can it happen? Yes, it can. So there was definitely, as soon as I walked into that room, you know, there's definitely that thought that crossed my mind for sure.
Did you see any of the operation? Like, could you see
No,
any
I did
gore?
not. I really did
You
not
saw
see
nothing.
any of that.
Did you look away, or was it just genuinely covered?
No, when I walked in, I did see her, and I saw him. I saw him doing chest compressions, but I didn't see anything on you. I did not see one thing, and I don't know if
Well,
I.
I know that one doctor, the main doctor, was on my right, and I know that the other doctor was on my left. So did you see them?
I definitely saw them. Yes, I just
Were
did
there
not
people like
see.
in front of them that were blocking the
I
view?
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah, it was either that or they had something up that they were doing at the time, and I just, you know, I remember walking around there
If
with
you're a
you.
labor and delivery nurse, sound off in the comments and tell us, was there something blocking it? And I can ask the nurses too, but like, was there something blocking it, or was it most likely just people?
Yeah, because I didn't know. I feel like it was people, but I wasn't. I'm not 100% sure. But walking back finally, as I was walking around them, I ended up finally meeting up with you, you know, and then being able to just be there for you while that was going on. I knew they were working on you, but I wasn't sure what they were doing. I know they were still working on the baby as well, so it was kind of like, you know, how I was kind of compartmentalized in different directions really at that moment, trying to be there for you and her and also to myself where I could be.
Do you still not know what they were doing with me at that time? Like, are you up to date, or up to like, are you educated now on what they would have been doing?
Yeah, I know now a little
Okay.
bit more about it. I mean, I'm not in the medical field, so I can't say that I know the right terms or any of that type of stuff of what,
Yeah.
you know, you would call certain things that they're doing, but definitely more familiar. I do remember though that the nursing staff when I was around there behind you were fantastic. I mean, they continued to be positive throughout the whole thing.
That was like the anesthesiologist team, just to be clear. That wasn't or anesthesia team, that wasn't our nurses, because they were off to my left.
Right. Yeah, I remember them being different. And but they were fantastic.
Mhm.
Like I remember the one lady that was back there with us most of the time.
Yeah.
That was
That said she went to
consistently.
school with my sister.
Yeah, she
But
was
yeah.
consistently positive. She was awesome.
Mhm.
She really was. So, I mean, it's important during that time to have that type of, you know, positivity back there because, you know, if they didn't say anything or if they just didn't show any emotion, whatever it is, honestly, it's more pressure, I feel like,
Yeah.
in that room. And I really felt like, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stuff happened. But without those people, I mean, that experience could have been totally different.
Well, I think that was part of, I could be wrong, but I think that might be part of their job in situations like that, is
Maybe.
to distract, or not distract, but um I mean, kind of distract, comfort, whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was just her doing her thing. Um but did it feel like a long time that they were working on Mila? Because for me, obviously, I had the quote unquote benefit of being on medication. And so while I remember all of it, it
Hmm.
still felt fast. It felt slow, but the but the length of time didn't register as a problem, I guess I could say. So for you, you didn't have the benefit of being on medicine. Did it feel like it was a lifetime?
Yeah, it was really slow for me for sure.
Did you know when they got her pulse? Like, did they say anything?
No event. I don't remember what was said over there because at that time you've got to remember they're over there doing their thing on her
Mhm.
and me as
I
you
didn't know if
know
they updated you.
they may have, and it may have been that same lady that was back behind us, but
Mm,
I just do remember though that my mind was focused on you at the time and checking on that when I could
mhm.
because you were there right in front of me. So I
But you
had to
couldn't see
be.
her at that
No,
point.
I couldn't. And I remember you kept asking me for updates, like if you knew anything or
Mm.
could see anything, and I said I
I
couldn't.
don't remember asking you that.
Yeah, you did. You
Interesting.
asked me numerous times,
Mm,
which again was fine. I mean, I was in the same situation, I probably would have too. But I definitely couldn't see anything, and I just remember our updates came mostly from that, from the baby, was from the lady that was behind us.
Yeah. Which were minimal because she couldn't see.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the most information when the doctor wheeled me personally to recovery.
Yep.
So talk about when we got to the NICU and saw her for the first time. I know I said that it felt a little weird because there was like a clinical kind of disconnect to some extent. And so, yeah, what was it? Did it feel clinical to you too?
It was definitely different. That connection there was definitely you know, I don't I don't even really know how to explain it well. It was more kind of like there was a little bit of a distance there for sure,
Yeah.
but I was honestly, while she was there, afraid to even touch her.
Yeah, I
Like
remember that.
I was scared to death, and I think that I was just worried she was so fragile
Mhm.
after going everything that she had been through.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to touch her. Like
Yeah,
it scared me, and
I
it's
remember
not that
that.
I didn't
You
want
didn't wanna hold her either, you
to.
were
Yeah,
scared.
I think it took me a day or two to even be able to do that.
The first time I held her, do you remember, was when they warmed her back up?
Yep.
And then once she was warmed back up, they would've changed her bedding, and so the nurse offered, me the opportunity to literally just hold her like this, which I'll put the picture up, while they were changing her bedding. So it wasn't like I could snuggle her. It wasn't like I could, hold her to my chest or anything like that. It was just me literally, like, holding her up so that they could change her bedding. I did give her a kiss. I remember that. So from there, I mean, I guess, how did you feel about leaving the hospital without her? I don't know if it affected you the same way it affected me.
No, for me, it was kind of different. I think I know that she needed to be there. There's no doubt that she was in the place she needed to be. Now that was hard for sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, I wanted her to be able to go home, but with everything that she just went through, I knew that wasn't possible.
Yeah. So a couple of key medical jargon, for those of you that wanna know it, is one thing that was super important is that her kidneys were fine. And if you know anything about medicine or situations like this, in a cardiac arrest or in a situation like that, and I'm not a medical professional, but this is what I have learned throughout this, is that the kidneys are the first thing that the body will divert blood to. And so the kidneys can be one of the first things that suffers damage. So her kidneys were completely fine, which was an excellent sign. The other thing is that her pH level, her cord blood gases, was almost normal. I think it was, if I remember correctly, looking back at her records, I believe it was 6.99. I believe a normal cord blood gas pH would be 7. And, so she didn't look on paper like she had been resuscitated, and in fact, the neurologist would later tell us that she didn't appear on paper as a baby that had been resuscitated, and certainly not for 25 minutes or 30 technically. Well, resuscitated for 25, but she would have been receiving, like, I guess you could still say resuscitation efforts into the 30-minute range. But let's talk briefly, because we didn't touch on it, but before they rewarmed her, they needed our consent or whether or not she would be a DNR. So you don't know what that is, do not resuscitate. There's a somewhat of a likelihood during the rewarming process that the baby can go into cardiac arrest again, and they needed to know if we would want her to be resuscitated again. And I was blindsided by that question. I was not expecting it. It was a necessary question. I just didn't know that it was gonna come. We decided, yes, we would want her to be resuscitated again because we hadn't gotten the results of her MRI yet. The doctor that had that conversation, loved dearly, is a friend at this point, had, explained the gravity of what we were potentially facing, and the he did in a very professional and kind way remind us that we had other children that we needed to think about as part of that decision. And I think that that's important because it's such a deeply personal decision and depends entirely upon the situation and the family and the preference and all of that stuff. But there are other children involved. And so because they couldn't make that decision, obviously, the parents have to make it. It is making a decision in a way for them as well. So yeah, we decided that, and I think we both pretty much instantly agreed. I don't think there was really much discussion. We were both on the same page automatically.
Yeah.
I will say this. I know that we had a conversation about feeling some guilt over selfish thoughts and not wanting to have a child that was severely disabled. And that is okay. That is normal. Any human being is going almost any human being is going to think that thoughts. It is okay to have when you are faced with something that you never expected to happen. And of course, you're going to have a fleeting thought or a persistent thought or a fear that you might be faced with parenting a child that you don't know how to parent and that you've never been faced with before, and the impact that that will have on your life, on your other children's lives, on your baby. And so yeah, we wrestled with that, but I think that we both kind of encourage each other. Like, we're both having this thought, and I think this is okay and this is healthy and we can process this together. I don't know, is there anything else you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, it's just good to talk about it openly and
Mhm.
come to the same conclusion because there's definitely discussion there.
Well, and I think a lot of people probably aren't willing to necessarily. It's hard to say, oh, yeah, I thought about the fact that it would be a quote burden to have a child with severe disability.
Mhm.
But look, caregiver burden is a real thing. We know that now. Caregiving burden is a thing, not the child. The child is not a burden, but the circumstances that the child is in are a burden for the family and for the child. They can also be a blessing, but that doesn't mean that they're not at times a burden. And in life, we're going to have burdens that have nothing to do with how much we love or care for or want, you know, that person.
Right.
Um, so yeah, so I guess you want to fast forward a little bit to the MRI.
Yeah, we can.
So after the MRI and when something like, or excuse me, after the cooling and situations like this, they're going to do a brain MRI. And so they took her for one, but that was really scary. And it was around 6, I guess, ish, that the neurologist came into the room, and he sat down with us and he told us that on paper, she didn't look like a child that had been resuscitated, like I said. And obviously, like, our hearts are in our butts, right? Like, we're absolutely terrified of what the MRI showed. It could have showed catastrophic brain damage. But he looked at us and he said, "The MRI results are completely normal." And in that moment, you are so completely shocked. You don't even know how to process what just happened. And I remember him saying something to the effect of that it was a miraculous type of recovery. And he also said something like that her body was circulating oxygen like past the point of CPR. Not sure exactly the words that he used, but that was kind of the gist of it.
He said beyond the.
I don't know if that was the exact words that he used.
How to use the word beyond.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down beyond the capabilities of CPR, but I but that was my best guess at what he said. I wish we had recorded it. But yeah, I mean, we are just immense relief. And so fast forward a little bit more, we're working on bottle feeding and things like that, and going to a crib and getting near to the time where it's time to go home. And they said that she needed another MRI, and that was just because sometimes there can be some changes from the first MRI to the second. And so they did the second MRI, and then he came in and he talked to us, which I was a little bit like, I kind of wish we had known that there was going to be a second one. Like, we didn't know until, like, I don't know, like the day before, right?
Mhm.
And that could have been something that they decided later.
Yep.
Maybe they didn't know. But I kind of wish that he had told us that there would be another one. But regardless, they did the other MRI. He came in, he talked to us. And this time he did say that there were some subtle changes on her MRI. And he essentially told us, that, I mean, he said, because in pediatric neurology, they just don't know. They never can know necessarily. The brain's super complicated, and in adult neurology too. But he had said that it could be absolutely like completely asymptomatic, or she could still technically have like cerebral palsy. So we were discouraged by that, but he did say that, I kind of forced it out of him, but he did say that there would very likely just be some mild developmental delays, if anything at all. And so she went home Thanksgiving Day. It was actually on Thanksgiving that we took her home, and the kids got to meet her for the first time. My mom was there and saw her for the first time, which was just a really special moment. We'll share some photos there, and so that is it for her story. Stay tuned because episode 3 is going to be your stroke, which we will start to dive into. Episode 4 is going to be when I was disabled 30 days later. And episode 5 is going to be a really heavy episode where we talk about Mila's seizure, not just any seizure. So stay tuned for those, and like, subscribe, share this with people that you think it might help. We want to help people. If you can help us out in that way, that'd be great.
Yep.
And
Thank you.
we will see you guys next time.